Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the TAA Vic Hotel Industry Update. Today, I'm excited to be joined by two Australian tourism industry leaders, Philip Harrison, the Managing Director of Tourism Australia, and Shay Keenan, the Chief Marketing Officer for Visit Victoria. Philip, I'm reliably informed that when you're among friends, you quickly revert to Pip. So I just wanted to check before we start whether we're sufficiently friendly down here in Victoria to warrant calling you Pip.
Very friendly, yes, no problem.
Thanks indeed. Pip and Shay join us at a very appropriate time. Of course, we've had some easing of restrictions over the weekend, some announcements yesterday from the Premier, and certainly coming into next weekend, I know that a number of the larger hotels are now seeing it as being economically viable to open their properties. So it's a great time to be having this conversation. A time when freedoms of trade and movement, as I said, make it viable for many hotel operators to reopen again. And of course, that push is being led by New South Wales. And interested to get your comments, Pip, being in Sydney, around what was then the Berejiklian government, but now the Perrottet government, and the actions that are going there, really leading the way, at least, with the reopening activities for Australia. So we'll hear from both Pip and from Shay around the strategies that they are looking to drive to not only get visitation back into Australia, but of course, importantly for our hotel network, back into Victoria. And just today, a couple of things. The session is being recorded, and please use the Q&A box if you have any questions that you would like to ask. The agenda for today, Pip will lead us off after my introduction, and then there will be a Q&A moment. So if you'd either, I'll just check with Asia, but I think we can either pop the question into the chat box, or indeed you could take yourself off mute and ask the question if you're feeling brave. You can do it that way. And I know that both of these agencies have worked very hard during lockdown to get us ready for reopening, and that's about where we are now. And as I said, we have reason for great optimism. We're very much looking forward, and certainly looking forward to those freedoms, not only next weekend, but on the 24th of November as well, as the Premier announced yesterday that pretty much from the 24th will be COVID normal without many restrictions at all. So I think the important thing to note just before we get into our presentation, and we'll double check the date with the Grand Hyatt Melbourne to make sure it's okay, but our State Awards for Excellence that we've run and cancelled 4 times, rescheduled at least, we're very much looking forward to hosting that on Wednesday, the 8th of December. So Wednesday, the 8th of December, you heard it here first. Certainly from what the Premier said on the 24th of November, we should be good to go on the 8th of December. And I know that all of industry is very much looking forward to a night of celebration that should have happened in June, that absolutely will happen on the 8th of December. So without further ado, as I said, I'd like to introduce Philippa. Just turn my page so I catch up with myself here. As Managing Director of the nation's global tourism marketing agency, Pip is responsible for driving TAA's strategies to create sustainable demand for Australian tourism experiences internationally. TAA works to find new and creative ways to achieve Australia's and Tourism 2020 strategy goals of growing overnight visitor spend to more than $115 billion annually. Pip joined TAA in February 2017 as Executive General Manager International to lead the organisation's international operations for Asia, the Americas, Europe and New Zealand, as well as the global distribution and partnerships. Prior to joining TAA, Pip spent 6 years working for Hamilton Island Experiences before holding various senior positions, sales and marketing related, across Sydney, London, and Contiki holidays as well. I sat in a similar presentation for the TAA New South Wales members recently, and I know that you'll gain a lot from Pip's observations today. Welcome to you, Pip. Over to you.
Thanks, Dougal. And yeah, I've got to say, it is really great to be out and about in Sydney. Everybody's coming back. And I saw on the news last night that the #1 menu item people coming back is the chicken schnitty. So I don't know whether that'll be the same in Victoria, but everyone's been missing the pub grub. So it's really exciting. And I've got to say that, you know, when I did this presentation that you just mentioned to your New South Wales chapter about 4 or 5 weeks ago, it was such a different atmosphere, and it just shows just how quickly things can change. So I'm going to give you an update today, but also with some variation just because things have changed. But before I do begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land which we all meet today, and also extend that respect to any other Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders who may be listening as well. And I just wanted to acknowledge, Dougal, your members, and the time that they've had through the last couple of years, and just hope that this is the beginning of some consistency and some normality and stability, and we can all get back to building back this great industry that we all really love. So one of the things that we talk about a lot, or I get asked about a lot, is are the markets that Tourism Australia has been present in going to change now that the world has changed quite considerably? And the short answer to that is no. We keep an eye on the international markets that offer the best opportunity for tourism to Australia and visitation to Australia. And I don't think that there's any market that's sitting there waiting for us to spend some marketing dollars in to really release some huge untapped potential. But I do think what's going to happen is that we are going to see different markets coming back at different rates. So these are the 15 markets that we were in prior to COVID-19. The size of the bubble is the size of the prize. And also we have added on in the last 2 years, going back into leisure, into New Zealand. So we've always been there from a business events point of view. But we did pull out a couple of years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, because New Zealand was very much a monostate travel market. And so the states were very, very active in that. And we thought we could do a better multi-state job in other markets, but we are back there at the moment. And similarly, we are also back into the domestic market for a period of time. So in terms of how we have been responding to the crisis over the last 2 years, it's been a little bit of a two-pronged approach. We have been really looking at where we can find markets that are open. And so for us, that's obviously been the domestic market. We have domestic marketing in our Act, but the federal government pulled us out of it about 8 or 9 years ago. And we went back in at the beginning of the bushfires when we received additional funding to really try and make up for the lack of international visitation with domestic marketing. Obviously, Visit Victoria and the states are very, very active in that. And so we were looking at how we could align rather than, fall over each other. And so what we did was really have a look at where are the areas of market failure in the domestic market, and how could we complement what Visit Victoria and the other states and territories were doing. So that's what we looked at. And so that was things like marketing cities, which we, haven't done for a while. We're usually trying to get people into the cities and then disperse them regionally. Having a look at getting Australians to do more experiences, because they tend to not do as many experiences. It's a bit more fly and flop travel. And so we focused on those sorts of areas with our partnership with Hamish and Zoe, but always keeping an eye on how are we going to get back into our international, and how are we going to get back to our more proactive marketing in market. And so what that looks like in terms of a path to reopening is that we are in domestic currently. We will not be in domestic after the end of this year. So that's been confirmed by our minister now. So we're actually now looking at tapering perhaps and finishing up in domestic prior to the end of June next year. In terms of our big campaigns, we have a lot of content marketing, a lot of media partnerships and the like, and those will continue to the end of the financial year. But as the world is reopening a little bit faster than we anticipated, we are going to be moving as many funds as we can into really trying to drive some of that pent-up demand that's out there in the world. So that's what we're doing. So if I had a little arrow, I'd probably be moving it back that way and shortening our domestic campaigns. The other thing I would be changing is at the top, it says bubble markets are open. We're moving away from that bubble market approach and thinking that there will be probably, you know, as quarantine is going away and as the aviation network reestablishes, we're probably going to be open in more markets than we anticipated before the end of FY22. So we're just having a look at what that reopening footprint does look like. But we have been, so in international markets, we've been maintaining our demand. We have maintained all of our offices. We have kept very active in the PR content space. We've kept very close to our airline partners and our distribution partners. The Aussie Specialist Program has been going from strength to strength. And in fact, we're training more people, more Aussie specialists than we did pre-COVID at the moment. So it's been a real beautiful point of connection with our distribution. And then we have individual market plans to really try and drive that conversion as quickly as we can when we reopen. And then when a critical mass of markets are open, sometime in the second half of 2022, we will go out with our big new global campaign to re-welcome the world to Australia. And that's a pretty exciting campaign that we're just working on at the moment, although running into a few issues around border closures and the like, but that is starting to free up. And so diving into a little bit more detail around that, how we're going from short-term opportunistic conversion to longer-term growth. And these are some of the things that we are focusing on to really re-establish and build back inbound tourism. And the crucial thing here is our aviation footprint. And that is something that is going to really need to be proactively worked on, particularly outside of Sydney and Melbourne. But the good news is we are seeing a lot of demand from global carriers, particularly important hub carriers like Singapore Airlines, Emirates, Etihad, wanting to come back and establish their Australian footprint. And of course, there's been some amazing announcements by Qantas over the weekend, going back direct to India for the first time. We've long talked about really needing a direct flight to India, and the economics of it have been really tricky to keep going, and Qantas have done it several times over the decades, and they're going to give it another go now. So that's really positive news. And also our distribution partners, and I'll talk a little bit about what we're seeing with our distribution partners as other markets open up, but it's really positive and they're really raring to go. We've done a lot around industry support, probably more than we do, because that is something that we've done in previous times, because that is something that has really been the area of the states and territories. But we have done some work around, particularly around building content at a operator level, and that's been really important too. And also just, you know, the other thing alongside Visit Victoria, just curating the information that's been out there. It's been really tricky to keep up with what's going on. So we've really upped our comms and tried to do that over this period of time. And Indigenous tourism and sustainable travel, we think that there is a moment in time to really elevate both of those areas. Indigenous tourism has always been really important to us. It's so unique to Australia, and there is so much demand out there, particularly from Western markets, and we're working out what that story is in Eastern markets. But we think that this is a great moment in time to really to go out with our, you know, with I guess an enhanced and deeper way to tell our Indigenous story. And sustainability is just incredibly important. It was a big driver of tourism and an increasingly important driver of tourism prior to the pandemic, and it is something that's really on consumers' minds at the moment. And then, of course, the business events industry, hugely important to both Melbourne and regional Victoria. And, you know, we are in the domestic market again with our event here this year. We're just about to launch another campaign in February. But again, keeping our international footprint has been really, really important for business events. That's New Zealand, the US, and the UK. And we're also doing some work now in Southeast Asia as well. And that is really long-term business for us. And it's been great to see that bid fund requests have been continuing to come in throughout this period. And there's a really strong pipeline of international events. Obviously, very low tolerance for anything like quarantine. And so the announcements over the last couple of weeks have been really positive for the business events industry as well. We did some work with BCG at the beginning of this crisis to just try and have a look at what will our recovery look like? What's the trajectory? BCG have just updated this work. And they think that it's going to be about 8 years before, in particular, the aviation footprint does recover. IATA and McKinsey and probably me as well think that that's probably a little bit pessimistic, and particularly based on the rapidness of the changes and how quickly we have seen other markets coming back. But these were the 5 scenarios that they talked about. And I talked about this a little bit in February as well, about these 5 scenarios they gave us, which at the end of 22, there's scenario 1 would be rapid normalization. We're back to 50% of pre-COVID levels at the end of 2022, down to number 5, which is the crisis continues, and we're at 10% of our inbound levels at the end of 2022. 4 weeks ago, we were firmly towards number 4, stage 4, which was we were really struggling. We had a lot of competitive challenges around travel friction. So there's lots of demand for Australian experiences, just lots of friction in the way. But I've got to say, and I do think that now we are looking at probably scenario 3, even 2. So a slow, careful recovery or bubbles opening really fast. And so I do think we are going to see by the end of 2022, we're back to about sort of between 25 and 40% of pre-COVID levels. So just to touch on domestic, our strategy here, as I said, was looking at those areas of market failure. And so it was really around encouraging Australians to travel like overseas visitors would, and helping those parts of the industry that were really reliant on international visitation. So that is cities, that is experience operators, and that is those destinations that are just have more than a 50% reliance on international versus domestic tourism. So that was our focus. We do consumer sentiment research, as Dougal said, every couple of weeks. And the good news here is that vaccinations have really helped Australians feel more confident to travel. This research was last done in September. So it was when we were all, 2 major markets were still locked down. And it was saying that 75% of us are confident to travel in Australia if we're vaccinated. When you look at international travel, it dropped to 58%, but we are seeing that change really, really quickly. And where are Australians thinking about travelling, or are they thinking about travelling again? So again, in mid-September, 39% weren't thinking about their next holiday right now. They were focused on other more immediate issues. But the flip side of that is 61% they were either dreaming about planning or actively booking their next holiday. And what we've seen is that this time has moved forward. So if you have a look at the top, light grey there, that is when we did our last consumer research in August, and the blue bars are when we did it in September. So you can see this is when are you planning on taking your next domestic holiday? So it has moved up. As restrictions have started easing, you can see that it is significantly moved up in the 1 to 3 box. So that's gone up 4 basis points. So that means that Australians are planning to travel, and they're planning to travel this summer. So I think that is, I guess, a live issue for many operators, just around getting your operations up to handle that demand. And obviously staffing was a hugely live issue in October, and it has gone away, but I think that one is back on the horizon. Why are people traveling? So connecting with friends and family is hugely important. So anything that your products can do, or your marketing can do around reconnecting family and friends, I think is really going to resonate with consumers, because that's what people are wanting to do. They've been locked away from each other and they want to travel, but they want to travel and reconnect with family and friends. They're looking for a beach holiday, a city escape, an overnight road trip. So pretty much looking to do everything. Industry challenges. So we talk to about 400 industry every quarter, and these are the live challenges over time. Obviously, when domestic borders are closed, that is probably the most catastrophic thing that can happen for most operators, followed by international borders, cash flow and business issues, and then consumer confidence. If you have a look, the third from the bottom is labour shortages. So the orange line was when we did this survey in October, and you can see that, you know, staffing issues was the biggest, livest issue back then when domestic borders were open. But I think that one is going to come back, and we are having a look at how we can re-encourage working holiday makers to come back to Australia. So we used to have about 250,000 economic visa holders or working holiday makers here at any one time. That has dropped to about 10% of that, and that's what we need to rebuild back up. And so we are talking about with Qantas and with Trailfinders in the UK about what we can do around getting some working holiday makers back to Australia. We were dealing with, you know, how do we look after the quarantine arrangements? How do we get visa holders back above the caps? But obviously now that we're so vaccinated and vaccinated ahead of time, that's less of an issue. So we will be working on that in some of our markets, particularly the UK, because they are one of our biggest sources of working holiday makers. In terms of our domestic activity, we are just about to launch a gifting experiences campaign. So that's launching the first week of November, and it's around giving the gift of travel rather than things this Christmas. And Hamish and Zoe are going to lead in that one again, but there is some really strong conversion partners behind that as well. And I would encourage you to jump on and have a look at how you can get involved with that, because it is going to be something that we think is really important, because you can give the gift of travel now, but as the world opens up and Australians start traveling out, it would be great for them to have some vouchers to travel domestically. And it's not a voucher system, it's about working with partners to give experiences, but those experiences can include things like city breaks, etc. We're working with Hello World and Red Balloon as the two key partners on that, but there are also other ways to get involved. As I said, we're launching an event here this year again in February, and we've got a Wiggles activation coming up as well. And we think that that's important. We're sponsoring their roadshow. They're doing a new song. They've got a book around road tripping. And as families with young children who are unvaccinated are going to stay closer to home for a while, we think this is a great opportunity to encourage young Australians to fall in love with Australia, and really create a bit of a legacy there, and get them to look after Australia as well. So there is a bit of a sustainability message in there. We also have a City Escapes campaign plan, and also Epic Holidays again. But again, those are just under review as we look at balancing our resources as the world does reopen. So in terms of our international strategy, it's really been about, keeping the dream alive, and we've done that very proactively, but then really preparing for reopening. And the reason that this is important, that we go hard and fast, is that we are currently, with the world opening, losing a little bit of market share. And that market share number is super, super sensitive. So we have of global market share, 0.64%. So it's, you know, less than 1%, but it's significant. It's over 9 million people, and it's a very sensitive number. If we can gain, you know, 0.06% of market share, that can mean an extra $6.5 billion for the Australian economy. So we're very conscious that at the moment there is market share going elsewhere, but we're also confident that people are spending more on discretionary things like travel at the moment. And people like Trailfinders are saying that they have never had such high transaction values. They're seeing that their transaction values, as people are going out to book again, are almost double what they were pre-COVID. So people have a lot of money over this time. They have got money stored in their banks. There is trillions of dollars sitting in people's savings accounts. So if you've come through this fully employed, then you've probably come out of it with more savings, and you've also probably come out of it with 2 years of pent-up demand of wanting to travel. So we know that there is a lot of demand out there, and we just are conscious that we need to capitalize on it. This is a super busy slide, so I'm just going to say it's on our website, but we do keep a view on each of our markets and how they're moving over time. So I would just say, don't try and read this. I'll put it on. It's on our website. I can let you know where it is. But for example, in the UK, we have seen recently that the next 6 to 12 months are 40% up in terms of forward bookings. Searches have just jumped recently, and it's a good indicator of how each market is recovering. This is a really great slide because it's telling you that there is demand out there around the world. So what this slide is it's forward bookings from our key markets, so the 15 that I talked about, to the blue line is to the rest of the world, and the orange line is from our 15 key markets to Australia. So you can see that our key markets have jumped. They're up to 30% overall of pre-COVID bookings. There was a big dip, and that dip is Delta, but you can see that people have learned to live with that and have been vaccinated, and they're ready to go again. And then when you cut that data a little deeper and you look at the bookings from some of our key regions to out of region travel. So we always compare ourselves to destinations that are 5 hours or more from that destination, because that's more likely to be a similar travel pattern to somebody who's traveling to Australia. So the top line is North America. You can see that they are now back to 46% of pre-COVID travel to long haul destinations. The second line there is the UK, and there's been a massive jump, as has, and the next one is continental Europe as well. So you can see that the bottom two is South and Northeast Asia, and that's largely around still border closures. So China is like us. They are not permitted to travel out of China without permission, but indications in that market are that they will open up after the Olympics, so about February 2022. This is an interesting one, and this is one I was talking about just before, which is when the US announced that they were opening up to the world. That was on the 20th of September. You can see the orange line there is travel bookings from the UK to the USA. So that big jump is in the week after the US announced that it was reopening to the UK market. The next day, agencies had deals in their in their shop front windows. They were out there, and bookings just went through the roof. So we have a few more travel frictions, and it's a more considered holiday coming to Australia, but we are expecting a bounce when we do announce our reopening. So I just wanted to finish with just some of the things that we're seeing in terms of emerging opportunities, because there has been a lot of change over the last 18 months. People are, you know, very changed. They've changed the way they look at their jobs. They've changed the way they look at traveling and the way that they live. How many of these are permanent changes is yet to be seen. But some of the things that we are seeing is that domestic travel is going to continue to grow. People have spent time having a look at Australia and really, I guess, learning for the first time how quickly our travel offering has changed, and people are really interested in Australia again. I think there's a new pride in what we have in our own backyard. That's not to say there isn't going to be a massive bounce of outbound travelers. There is, and that's coming, and we're seeing that already. But, you know, particularly families and grey nomads are going to stay closer to home. But I do think that one of the beautiful legacies of this period, or a silver lining if you'd like, is that people are going to have a domestic holiday and an international holiday, but hopefully a more substantial domestic holiday going forward. The next one, people will pay for safety and quality, is really interesting. We do a long-term attitudinal study in partnership with Visit Victoria and our states and territory, other states and territories. And we are seeing that value for money, Australia's proposition as a value for money destination is changing. It's gone up. Our cost hasn't changed. And in fact, for a period of time, it will probably be a little bit more expensive to get here. But people are prepared to pay more for safety and quality. Therefore, they're seeing it as a more a value for money destination. So the takeout there is that, you know, there's no need to race to the bottom with discounting. People want what you have to offer, and they're prepared to pay for it. Travelers now wanting to do the right thing is really around that sustainability and that cultural piece. And that is really something that you're going to see coming through more and more in our messaging. But our messaging is really going to be about telling your stories. I think there's some incredible things going on in the industry in both of those areas. And we see ourselves as a platform to tell those industry stories. The next one, work and travel behaviors are changing. I think this one is super interesting. People are working from anywhere, and, you know, we're seeing on OTA search engines and in terms of just travel patterns that people are living and working anywhere now. And so people are searching for much, much longer stays. You know, people search for a 4-week stay on booking.com, for example, and those searches have gone up, you know, in the double digits. And so there is a real opportunity there around having products that you can offer longer term stay people. And we actually did see a lot of that. There was a bit of a migration. I was in Darwin just after the last Melbourne lockdown last year, and they were saying that they had a huge amount of Melbournians who had migrated up there and stayed up there for the period of the lockdown to escape being locked in. So I think there's some interesting shifts in the way people work and travel, and much longer term stays. Content's always been really important. It's just so important right now, which is why we're doing that video project with industry. And the other thing that I just wanted to end on was experiences, food and wine. They are going to remain the key reason that people travel. So, you know, people want that. How they access it might change a little bit, but what they want and why they travel has not changed. And Australia's brand metrics have gone through the roof over this period. So I think, you know, I'm really optimistic about the future of Australian tourism. And I think that we just, you know, have to remove those frictions, and we're going to and fix our staffing issues. And then I think we're hopefully in for a good couple of years, because don't we need it? So that's everything for me. Happy to take some questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Pip. There's some great insights there as I work out how to turn my video back on. There we go. I think the key observations I made there were the importance of direct flights into Australia. I think the economic benefit of those. I heard the state tourism minister say that a direct flight into Melbourne is worth about $1 million to the state's economy. So some great opportunities there if we can get the slots right in the airports. And I think the opportunity to tell Australia's unique Indigenous story, that certainly came through for me. And that observation you made about sustainability being very important as well. Great to hear that consumer confidence is growing as our market opens up. And as you said, many reasons for visiting friends and families as a key reason for travel. And also that strong pent-up demand and the willingness to spend. And I think that observation about that value for money proposition, you don't need to be bargain basement and cheap, but Australians have got a keen eye for value for money and are willing to spend if it is indeed value for money. So some questions for Pip, if we have them, please.
We haven't got any questions in the chat box yet, so if anyone has one, feel free to pop it in the chat or Q&A box, or put up your hand so we can bring you up and you can ask the question verbally if you'd like, but not yet.
Don't be shy. This is a fairly unique opportunity to have Pip in our midst. So Pip, I might start if I can, just in terms of the observation you made around the staffing challenges. And if we look at the travel bubble countries in the short term, do you think the likes of Singapore, New Zealand, perhaps Taiwan and that sort of Pacific Rim, will they present some opportunities for workers to come over into our industry and, obviously fill some vacancies that are very, very much needed at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think all of the above. We're working pretty hard on the UK one, just because we think that that probably offers the best opportunity. But yeah, we will be looking at all markets to try and attract working holiday makers. It's something that we've been working on for a few years now. And because the youth market, they're not only important from a work point of view, they're also important from a travel point of view, because they come here and they work and they spend as much as they earn. So really valuable travelers from our point of view. So yeah, all markets are important. Taiwan's a massive inbound market for the working holiday maker. Yeah.
And if we look at the emerging, obviously, initially we sort of might have been, we might have been had all our eggs in the China baskets. One of the criticisms might have been that we're a bit too reliant on the China market. And if you look at the growing middle class in India, maybe just some observations of the importance of the Indian market and some of those emerging markets.
Yeah, we have always had a balanced portfolio, which is why we've always been really keen that we do stay across those 15 markets. There's no doubt that with the growth of China, they have had a lot of resource over the last few years, and we've seen that double-digit growth. We won't see that again, but that still remains an important market for us. India is something that we classify as a rising star. So it's not a star market because the numbers don't justify that, nor does the yield. But we think that, as you said, there's a growing middle class. It's going to be more than 500 million, and it has huge potential for us. So we overinvest in India versus the return that we get, because if you have a look at leisure travel, it's tiny numbers into Australia. It's 75,000 a year of the 300 or so thousand who come, but I think it has long-term potential. So yes, we do invest in that market.
And as your question from Dean on the chat box there?
Yes, and it does touch on the China market.
Okay.
Thanks, Dean, for asking this question. Given both COVID and the current trade disputes with China, what is the expectation of a return to similar visitation pre-COVID?
Yeah, look, it's a really great and super live question. China had 1.4 million arrivals before COVID. There's always been a geopolitical layer with China, always. And there is a very strong possibility that there will be some measures taken from a tourism point of view that might see our numbers go down a little bit. But my point of view is, even if our numbers from China halve, they're still in the top 3 of our 3 markets. So it's still an important market. We've seen that market change over time from being, mainly ADS groups when we first started, to now being mainly FITs and GITs and you know, with strong VFR connections. So we think that China will remain important into the future, but we do think that for a period of time, it probably won't be back to those pre-COVID levels. But, you know, we look at, you know, how are we with our distribution partners? Really close. We still get 500 people turning up to a training session. We're just renewing our MOUs with Air China, China Eastern, China Southern. You know, when we have our events, we do have Chinese and Australian officials turning up. Sea Trip has an Australia pavilion that's going from strength to strength. We have an MOU with them. So Global Times, which is the mouthpiece of the Communist Party, they've just done a whole partnership with us where they tell Australian travel stories. So that's what we focus on, and that's seeming quite positive. So we will continue to just work on those people-to-people links, and you know, and just kind of, we have a long-term view in the market, I guess.
Great, thanks, Pip. And we've had another question coming from Ed. Has Tourism Australia looked at the revival of the cruise market globally and the effect on inbound market, sorry?
Yeah, the cruise market has really jumped back super quickly. And it's interesting, I think in Australia, cruising had some bad press right at the beginning because of because of a few incidences. But around the world, it has jumped back, and the demand is actually above pre-COVID because people see it as a safe alternative, a controlled environment that's super safe. And we think that cruising, from an inbound perspective, is becoming increasingly important to Australian tourism, particularly, you know, for that pre and post as well, that opportunity. And so we're just working with Clear on what we do in terms of relaunching cruise internationally. And there's some opportunities in early next year in the US that we're probably going to start with.
Great. Asia, I've got one more question if I can. Just our clean green image, Pip. We've obviously worked very hard on a global scale to demonstrate the clean green aspect of Australia's tourism offer, and you mentioned the sustainability piece earlier. I'm interested in terms of how people maybe in the Northern Hemisphere perceive Australia at the moment, and whether or not they say, gee, they've done pretty well with COVID, we feel safe going over to Australia, or whether the fact that our longest lockdown, Victoria obviously having the longest lockdown in the world, whether that's getting some sort of prominence in the sort of world in terms of a willingness to come to Australia and come to Victoria.
Yeah, look, it has, there's been a lot of global chatter about Australia and lockdown, and I think there's groups in the US who are trying to free us all. But my view on that is that, you know, it's short term. You know, people will move on from that. It's a factor at the moment, but people will move on from it. And as I said, you know, Australia's brand metrics and also our brand health in terms of consideration, intention, desire to travel to Australia, we've seen an uptick in all of that. So any of that chatter, I think, is fairly temporary.
We've got one more question from Dean.
Yes, we do. Thanks, Dean. You mentioned the huge opportunity for the work from anywhere market in Australian tourism. How big do you think this economy could be given the numbers of companies going remote or hybrid, and what strategies is Tourism Australia looking into to support and leverage this?
A huge opportunity for work from anywhere. Yeah, look, we haven't quantified it yet. I'll ask our strategy and research guys to have a look at that. But I do think it's an interesting one, and it's important. We're looking at how, you know, how this might change our tourism marketing, because our marketing is very leisure focused. But let me come back to you on that one. It's a bit of an emerging trend, so let's just see how it comes out of COVID when people are heading back to the office. But I think it's an interesting one.
Thanks, Pip. And we've had one more coming from Grant, and then we'll let you go. Sorry. How confident are you that domestic travel will be strong across both leisure and corporate markets?
I think we've seen historically that it has continued to grow anyway. So domestic was growing faster than inbound pre-COVID. And we do think that people will stay close at home. And I've just actually, you know, again, talking about live issues, we're just working at the moment in quantifying, you know, the Australians who are just busting to get out and just want to get away, and the others, and the group who want to stay a little bit closer to home aren't sure that the world is safe out there. And so we're just sort of having a look into that at the moment. But longer term, domestic travel's always been strong and it will continue to get stronger. I think as long as our product offering can be competitive from a value and offering point of view, I think that's really, really important. But there's been some great innovations in and infrastructure improvements over this time. Corporates, we know that our corporates have seen the value in meeting and conferencing together. So the business events side, we do think will come back. The jury's out on corporate travel. A lot of companies are having a stab at what they think corporate travel might be like, as people have realized there are other ways to do business. But, you know, it just takes, you know, your competitor to go into market and get a few good contracts for you to jump right back on that wagon. But people like, you know, the airlines are looking at anywhere between sort of 10 and 30% less corporates. But I think that one's still playing out.
Thanks indeed for your time. I'm conscious that you've got a very busy role and you're probably being dragged into other things as we speak, but really appreciate your insights today. And I think as I said, a number of key observations I took away, but one certainly is the opportunity to deliver unique and new experiences, and they'll be, you know, grabbed by the traveling public. So thank you indeed for your observations and your time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, so now we thought we'd have more of a local focus and introduce someone that we know and have worked with a number of times, and it's great to have you back, Shay. So Shay Keenan, who is the Chief Marketing Officer at Visit Victoria, and she of course plays a pivotal role in capturing the depth and breadth of Victoria's tourism offer in compelling stories and messaging to make our state stand out from the herd. So she's obviously been central to campaigns across the lockdown. We'll of course remember the Click for Vic campaign, the Stay Close, Go Further, and more recently the Get Set campaign that promoted day trips and staycations. I think not only for regional Victoria, we saw the uptick in regional Victorian travel, but so important, of course, to the CBD and metropolitan hotels to get people back into the city and remind them about what's new, interesting and different in the hub of our tourism offer. So welcome, Shay. It's great to have you with us today and really looking forward to your insights.
Thanks, Dougal. Thanks so much for having me. And look, it's great to be here today off the back of yesterday's announcement. There's certainly a greater spring in my step and the steps of the team. I think my favourite quote from the Premier yesterday was the ambition of having 80,000 people at the MCG for the Boxing Day test. That's certainly a target that I think we can achieve. So I did want to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land where I am today, the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I will share my screen and hopefully next time I do this, we can actually be in person, which would just be wonderful. So I'll very much look forward to that. Forgive me while I just fix up my slides. Just get the okay from, yeah, all good, thank you. So again, look, really great to be today. Fantastic context from Pip, from a Tourism Australia perspective, to give a really great outlook around what the international outlook is. We obviously work incredibly closely with the team at TAA. We're enormously grateful for their support. Particularly the support they provide in that really deep research and insights, which Pip took you through just then. I'm going to spend some time today just giving you some context and insights that we're seeing through the lens of Melbourne and Victoria. I'll give you a look too at the major events calendar and what that's shaping up to look like for next year. And then obviously, and really importantly, our reopening plans that can now officially kick off as from 6 p.m on Friday. And I'll also talk to you about an initiative that we're hoping to launch this week around encouraging Victorians to travel kindly when they visit all the amazing experiences across our state. So it's no doubt that, and I did have to jump into this presentation this morning just to make some updates off the back of yesterday's announcement, but we now have a really fantastic and clear framework from government that sets the direction for how we can roll out our marketing and recovery initiatives. And look, we do that in the context that we recognise that the recovery will look a bit different for regional Victoria and for Melbourne. And so, of course, the effort that we provide and where we set the direction and priorities of our investment will be very much done with that lens in mind. And look, as Pip mentioned, Visit Victoria too, we've maintained our presence across our international markets. So Visit Victoria and MCB, we kept all of our offices in place and our people in place. And we have invested in keeping Melbourne and Victoria top of mind through a range of social media, PR, and of course, those really important relationships with our key distribution partners. So we hope that and we think that will put us in good stead as international markets come back. And of course, it's just underscored the importance of the Team Melbourne and Team Victoria approach, and dare I say Team Australia approach to recovery. And I think we've certainly seen that in terms of the partnerships that we've enjoyed through working incredibly closely with government, with national bodies, and of course with the industry. I just wanted to talk a little bit first about Melbourne and recognising that what we saw through reopening, and in fact it's almost a year to date since the state reopened last year, and we recognise that there certainly was a pent-up demand for travel, and we saw the experience of regional Victoria experiencing, you know, really busy time. So for us, we acknowledge that we need to get the city back to its vibrant self. And obviously it relies so much more on interstate and international travel. So we're certainly focused, and the great news yesterday about interstate travel being open to us later this week, and we'll be definitely doubling down on our efforts to bring people back into the city. I can't underscore the importance of our major events pipeline. It is and will remain the cornerstone of our recovery initiatives. We have an incredible pipeline, which I'll take you through, which would be strong in a pre-COVID context, but in a COVID normal environment, I think makes it really, really compelling. And we are fortunate. It is our secret weapon, and we have a number of moments coming up that really help us position Melbourne as the vibrant city that we know that it is. So certainly for us, first, the Boxing Day test, but secondly, the Australian Open. It is an incredible global platform that allows us to tell the world that Australia, Melbourne, Victoria are open and ready to welcome our visitors. And of course, again, in terms of supporting Melbourne, we've had the national program, business events program through MCB. So focusing in on Melbourne in the short term is certainly part of our agenda. Some of this, again, research that Tourism Australia shares with us, and I think it's just worth reflecting on the mood of the nation. We've certainly seen, and Pip just showed too, that we're seeing confidence to travel within Australia starting to turn around, but also it's worth considering the environment that we've all been in. I think particularly in this chart here, we can see that sense of division that has existed, and I think perpetuated by border closures. So I think the opportunity for people to get back to travel and address that feeling of feeling stressed and divided and disconnected, travel really plays a key role in building people's connection to themselves, to family, to friends. So we've got a lot of positive news for an audience within Australia that are really receptive to having some joy in their life. And our brand is incredibly strong. So this is our brand health study. We've been measuring Melbourne's brand health for over 20 years. We ask Australians to, we ask them what capital city do they associate with offering a range of different experiences. Melbourne is the blue line, the dark blue line, and you can see that Australians recognise Melbourne first and foremost as offering all of these key experiences. So events, shopping, cafes, bars, restaurants, laneways, cultural events. And yes, of course, with the lockdowns affecting Melbourne, we have seen some year-on-year declines across these attributes, but our leadership position is still significant. And from a major events perspective, which of course we've seen national coverage around a number of Melbourne's events being cancelled or moved to other states, we still have a 30 percentage point lead against Sydney as being recognised. We are still the major events capital of this country. And in addition to that, we've got experiences that Australians are looking for. So again, this is a bit of a tricky chart, but basically it maps across the bottom experiences that people associate with Melbourne, and then also tracks it against the kinds of experiences, how much they're looking forward to getting back to those experiences in a COVID normal world. So that top right-hand quadrant is what we want to aim for. And you can see there the experiences that people are most looking forward to: food, restaurants, shopping, culture, cafe, bars, theatre, events, are all the experiences that Australians most associate with Melbourne as offering. So again, that puts us in a really strong position as we're now emerging from lockdown. And we have campaigns ready to go. So the reopening announcements yesterday are really exciting, and we have a number of campaigns, as Dougal called out before I started, ready to go. We have the team this morning quickly moving to try to bring forward our media schedules in line with yesterday's announcement. So we feel really confident that we've got the tools we need in our artillery to very much put Melbourne and Victoria back on the agenda of Australians and international audiences when we can. So just looking at our reopening marketing strategy, there is a clear job to be done for Melbourne and Victoria. Firstly, we need to start to prepare consumers for reopening, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in relation to travelling kind and the need to plan and book ahead. There is a job, no doubt, to build a confidence in Australia about the Victorian experience. So we are a state that is known, as you can see from those charts, as being a thriving, bustling city with intimate experiences and large crowds. And when you've been in lockdown, there is a knock to consumers' confidence about the experience that they might get in Melbourne and Victoria. So our job is very much to make sure that we can address that and re-establish Melbourne as the most preferred destination in Australia. So we have enjoyed being the most preferred city in Australia for a long period of time. And recent months with lockdown has seen certainly a decline in preference, but as Pip mentioned too, we see that as being short term, and when we can activate our campaigns and showcase the depth of experiences that we have, we certainly think we'll see that rebound very quickly. And we know the need to really drive immediate visitation into our city and into our regions. So we're going to do that by, as I said, using the events calendar as the cornerstone and as a foundation of our marketing approach, and positioning ourselves as a thriving and vibrant destination. We are different to other destinations within Australia. We are very much a short break state. The majority of our domestic travellers stay for between 1 and 3 nights. Because they come for that unique city experience. So that is definitely how we will be showcasing, and as Dougal mentioned, the depth of experiences and events that we have, but also the new attractions. So whilst we have experienced long lockdowns, we have really enjoyed a significant amount of new news in terms of restaurants and hotels. new events that are taking shape. So there's a lot of new reasons for Australians to come back and visit Melbourne and Victoria. We'll be kicking our activities off as soon as we can. And as I said, the team are rallying around a revised media schedule off the back of the announcement yesterday, but we'll certainly have advertising campaigns kicking off in Victoria and across Australia this month. And then from an international perspective, very much a market-by-market approach, working closely with and accessing the fantastic insights available to us through our partnership with Tourism Australia. I just wanted to share with you the Get Set campaign that we launched last year. I'm mindful that much of our activity that we implement takes place in interstate markets. And so therefore, most of our industry in Victoria don't get the chance to see a lot of the activities. So this is the campaign that you will see activating very shortly.
Hi.
Hi.
We were thinking of having a cruisy day.
Maybe grab a pastry and a coffee.
See some street art.
Maybe go to a museum.
Grab a gelato.
And have afternoon tea.
Any suggestions?
I'm hoping that worked. I really am. Here's some more of the creative. We worked with, not an advertising agency to produce that campaign. We worked with Working Dog Productions, who are more known, I think, for their movie work and TV series. But I think they brought that gentle Australian humour to the film. But certainly what it does do is allow us to showcase just the energy and the vibrancy of the city. Through we've got a number of different iterations of that television campaign, and including one that's focused on major events, which we hope to get into market very soon. And it really does create a great platform for us to showcase those experiences. As with all of our campaigns, we track through quantitative research the performance of the campaign, and certainly Get Set no experienced interruption. We launched it in February last year, and there were a couple of stop-start moments because before ultimately we had to pause our activity due to the lockdown. But from the most recent study, we can see the campaign is performing in exactly the way we would want it to. It's certainly being seen by our audiences, which means we've got the right media campaign in place. The messages are resonating really strongly with our audiences, and it is driving people to take action and to book, research their trip to Melbourne, or indeed book. And one of the other things I wanted to call out is, we ask a lot of questions about people's reaction to the campaign. One of the strongest emotional responses that consumers indicated this campaign elicits is joy. And I wanted to call that out in the context of the previous slides around the mood of the nation and people feeling stressed and divided and disconnected. So we know that we've got a campaign that is eliciting a really positive response amongst Australians, and also that people believe that it's showcasing what they expect of the city of Melbourne and Victoria in terms of, again, going back to that real vibrancy and hustle and bustle and energy of our city. So we're going to implement all of our recovery initiatives through this huge ecosystem of our paid activity, our media partners, our trade and distribution partners, and also our event partners that collectively provide us with an enormous scale to reach really large numbers of Australians right through the funnel in terms of looking at building awareness, building that consideration to travel, and then obviously working with partners and industry to ensure that we can drive people to actually book their flights, book their accommodation, and commit to that trip. So you'll see these campaigns implemented across integrated campaigns, across all of these key channels that we know Australians are looking at when they're making travel decisions. The Australian Open, as I mentioned, presents us with that significant opportunity to really connect with Australians and global audiences. And we are fortunate to have an incredibly strong relationship with the team at Tennis Australia that will see us activate and leverage a range of different opportunities, one of which is of course that really key signage of Melbourne on Rod Laver Arena, and what a fantastic message that is. We'll also be working with Channel 9 as a broadcast partner, which again gives us access to a whole range of opportunities, whether it be significant ad placements through the broadcast, but content integrations, the Today Show being based in Melbourne for 2 weeks, allows us to tell a really strong story. And of course, we also get access to significant advertising through the international broadcast of the Australian Open into markets into the US and Southeast Asia, and also in South America. So it is a really integrated platform and such a critical one for us as to sort of kick off the year of Melbourne and Victoria reopening. We're also looking at a range of content partnerships with the other networks to do the job of reassuring people that Melbourne is open and has a depth of events and attractions and experiences that people must come and visit. So we're looking at an initiative with Channel 7 and also with the project that would see a bespoke series developed using their talent, the network's talent, to talk about and showcase those experiences, looking at one over the summer period and then another in that March-April period in the lead up to into winter. And of course, we have our own channels, which we've leveraged significantly through lockdown, but the official visitors guide, which Visit Victoria develops in a strong partnership with industry, sees us produce over 1 million copies annually that are distributed certainly within the state, in the interstate, and very soon we hope will be in the hands of international arrivals into our city. Our e-newsletters currently have a database of over 300,000 people, which allow us to regularly send updated news, information about staycations and deals and offers to our global audiences. And then, of course, our social channels, which are continuing to grow for us on a daily basis, between Instagram, Facebook, and of course some of the other channels in overseas markets. So we do have a really solid platform to be able to take the messages of Melbourne and Victoria to those audiences. This is a really big slide too, and apologies for the detail, but we are about to embark on a national PR blitz. And this just gives you a sense of the number of broadcast opportunities that Visit Victoria is working on with our key partners. We have some really great relationships with 9 and 7 and 3AW, and so you're going to see over the weeks of October, November and December a number of moments where Melbourne and Victoria will be showcased to a national audiences through weather crosses, through outside broadcast with Ross and Russ going up to the King Valley. Certainly lots of content in Melbourne, given that is going to be where the greatest need is in the short term. But lots of other opportunities coming our way, but hopefully this gives you line of sight over what is going to be a significant PR push for us over the coming weeks. And of course, and really importantly, we are working with and have continued to work with our key distribution partners. We were afforded through Tourism Australia some additional funding to allow us to work with these partners. But if there's a partner that flies or sells accommodation and experiences to Melbourne and Victoria, we're working with them. Now, sometimes that's working with them in the context of sale fairs, such as the examples you can see here, but it's also about content and accessing their audiences and databases to make sure that Melbourne and Victoria are on the are on the consideration list. And again, a number of sort of experiences platform, Red Balloon and Fluke too, in line with Tourism Australia's gifting promotion that will be taking place over the next couple of weeks. We're certainly leveraging the investment that TAA are making there. And from an international perspective, it's obviously critical for Melbourne, and like Pip indicated, it is a watching game in terms of looking at the markets and how they're going to reopen. There's obviously been a lot of positive progress in recent weeks, and things are moving incredibly quickly. We do have an international reopening playbook. So regardless of the market that comes back, we're able to execute very quickly reopening plans. And obviously working collaboratively with the other states and Tourism Australia. We have maintained our relationships with KDPs and likewise with, as Tourism Australia is, looking at renewing all of our MOUs with airline partners such as Singapore, Qantas, and the airlines in China. We have a Team Melbourne approach to aviation access, which has, positioned and put Melbourne and Victoria in a really strong position previously. And we know that is absolutely critical to the return of international travellers. We'll certainly keep industry posted with our plans as they shape up, but obviously we are certainly looking at Singapore and New Zealand as the key to that in the short term. And a bit like Tourism Australia, we do treat New Zealand a bit like a domestic market. They do travel. When they come and travel to Victoria, they stay within Victoria. They don't travel outside the state. So they're very much in our reopening plans. And finally, I wanted to just brief you on an initiative that we're hoping to launch within the next couple of days. And this is really in response to industry concern about the busyness of the summer period and some of the staff shortages that we're very aware are being experienced. So Visit Victoria is going to launch a campaign, a Travel Kind campaign in the coming days, really to try to mitigate consumer frustration or consumer concern around the experience as our industry reopens. So really it's about trying to educate consumers about some of the challenges that our industry might be facing and encourage them to be kind and patient as they return around Victoria. We think the key to that is planning ahead, so ensuring that not only the accommodation is booked, but other experiences such as restaurants or tours as well. And we are creating a number of tools for industry to support them through this through these weeks. So we'll be using some paid media and owned and earned activities. PR will be a big push, and in fact it's already started. We've had our chief executive engaged by media in recent days, and very much Brendan has conveyed the message and encouraging people to travel kind. And we're also using some of our industry leaders and operators to help personalise the industry. So they'll be front and centre in our campaigns, talking to media and encouraging people to get back out there, of course. They'll talk about how excited they are to have visitors return, but they'll also just personalise some of those issues that the industry is facing, and again encouraging people to book ahead, plan ahead, and go gently when they revisit all these amazing experiences across our state. We will be releasing an industry toolkit, so for some of the smaller businesses that will find this a bit of a challenge, they'll have some key messages, some point of sale material that they can put inside their business. We'll be encouraging everybody to use the hashtag #TravelKind, and I think on the 14th of November is World Kindness Day, so we'll certainly be doing a big push behind that day as a way of really asking Victorians to do what they've done so well during lockdown, which is to support Victorian businesses, and as I said, be understanding when they do that. I think, just conscious of time, I was going to share just a couple of key highlights of activity recently, but I'll just move that through that very quickly. I'm sure that there'll be questions, and I certainly want to allow time for that. So thank you very much. As I said, I'm really happy to take some questions from the group.
Thanks, Shay. And once again, a highly informative presentation. I took from that the clear framework that the government has now given us, give us some certainty to move forward. The importance of the major events pipeline, and I know that suffered a little bit of reputational damage recently, but it's great to hear that from a brand perspective, it hasn't done any damage there. I guess the comments that you made around travel playing such an important role in that reconnection journey, that was really resonated with me. And I think, you know, the reopening priorities that you went through, and of course that wonderful Travel Kind initiative as well, I think that'll certainly resonate with many. So Asia, do we have questions for Shay?
We don't have any questions yet, so please feel free to pop them in the chat box. Karen, we do have a comment just a bit around sharing presentation slides and the webinar recording, which we will certainly do that. So we can all send a copy to all the attendees once we have it all ready.
We've got a docile audience today. I'm happy. Of course, Shay knows that I'm always happy to ask a question, so I'll do so. I know one of the things you've mentioned before, Shay, is the proximity of Melbourne to interstate markets and that ability to sort of stay an extra day or have an extra experience, have another meal, etc. How are you sort of blending that in, particularly now that people are, you know, that working from everywhere piece? People are looking at potentially staying longer, not necessarily so worried about the 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and being back in their home state, you know, for work on Monday, for example.
Yeah, I think that is a real opportunity. As I mentioned, Melbourne and Victoria has always been a short break, or sorry, has increasingly become a short break destination, and centred around weekends. But we do see opportunities to encourage people to stay, you know, to turn the weekend into a 3-night experience. And I think also the other thing that we're very mindful of in our organisation is the enormous amount of annual leave that is sitting on balances, and organisations do not like annual leave, you know, banking up like that. So we're also looking at campaigns that we can execute to encourage people to take that annual leave and create their own long weekends. So to extend their trip by another couple of days, tapping into their annual leave, because we do think that is certainly going to be an issue that a number of Australian businesses are looking at. Certainly one that we're looking at Visit Victoria, and very much encouraging our staff to get out there to get those leave balances down. So that's another way that we can tap into trying to get people to stay that extra night and get some visitation into midweek, which we know is really, really important.
Yeah, I think that's a critical observation, that midweek, spreading that demand across the week is certainly something that hoteliers are very interested in. I don't think many of them in the short term would have too much issue on a Friday and Saturday night filling their bars, restaurants and bedrooms, but you know, great to hear that those midweek initiatives are front and centre as well. Asia.
So we've just had a question coming from Andrew. Is there any concern about the state borders that remain closed to Victoria, like WA, for example?
Yes. I mean, obviously, I think, like Pip said, we would like to see national consistency around borders. WA is not a huge source market for Melbourne and Victoria. The most important source market is New South Wales. New South Wales is over 55% of the interstate market to Melbourne, followed by Queensland. So those two markets are critical for getting interstate visitors back into Melbourne. Certainly WA, we want to be in markets, in all markets. But as I said, the most important markets for us are New South Wales and Queensland in terms of the volume of visitors that come here from those markets.
Thanks, Shay. Is there any more questions before we close the session out today? Feel free to raise your hand, or we can answer.
I just wanted to ask Shay a question around the major events and obviously the reference to our secret weapon. And of course, major events are always sought after by other states around Australia. And there's been some press around the Grand Prix in the last couple of days. Reputationally, it's interesting to hear you say that you think there's no long-term damage in terms of the major events capital piece, but it's certainly, I'm imagining, something that you're working very hard on with those key agencies that deliver those major events to make sure that they stay in Melbourne.
Absolutely. And we enjoy incredible support from the government. We saw in the budget that was handed down last year an increase in funding to our major events fund, which enables us to be and remain incredibly competitive. The continual investment in infrastructure that we have, and people will see that through the Australian Open with the new arena open there. We are incredibly ambitious and incredibly competitive. It is not going to deter us. And as I said, we absolutely, we had some year-on-year impact to our brand, but we are significantly ahead of the other states. And so the conversation for us is around, we are a leader. How do we behave? How does a brand behave when it's a leader in a category? And so that's certainly something that we are and will remain incredibly ambitious on.
Thanks, Shay. We've just had one question coming from Karen. Does Visit Victoria have any plans to lobby the government about spending vouchers like New South Wales? I think they've got the accommodation, food and beverage and cinema vouchers.
Yeah, look, we are working really closely with the department into tourism and events and the visitor economy department regarding vouchers. We know that they were really well received, the regional vouchers and the Melbourne vouchers as we reopened last time. We also, Visit Victoria held a roundtable recently, which Dougal and probably many members joined, and we were provided with fantastic input and feedback from the industry directly around if government is going to release more vouchers, this is the shape and these are the things that would be really important for the industry to see alongside that. So we are actively engaged in conversations with government regarding vouchers. We understand their popularity.
Perfect. Thanks, Shay. That's all for questions in the chat box for now. And that's Dougal. You had another question?
Well, we've timed it perfectly, Asia, because I think we've got a minute to recognise Shay's contribution today. We really appreciate it, Shay. You're always so giving of your time to the Victorian hoteliers, and your insights are always very well received. So thanks everyone for joining us today. It is a great week as we look to reopen and re-energise the state. And of course, the tourism and hospitality offer is absolutely central to that. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shay.